Hi, my name's Zach Varda, and this week on Over the Boards, we talk about the Ohio State men's hockey team making it to the Frozen Four. Welcome back to Over the Boards. This week we're going to be talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes making it into the Frozen Four. They beat Princeton in the round of 16 and then defeated defending champs Denver to secure their spot. I guess first, just kind of some initial takeaways. For me, I thought they looked really dominant. The Denver coach after the game said that if the Buckeyes keep playing the way they play, they can be the national champions. 5-1 against Denver is extremely impressive. Sean Romeo comes away as the top player in the region, the most outstanding player, voted for by the media. So I just thought, if you're looking at the last two games as an indicator of how the Frozen Four is going to go, I'm not sure you could have done any better than Ohio State did.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that Ohio State played, if not its two best games of the season, definitely its best game of the season against Denver. And all the coaches in the Frozen Four right now know how dangerous that Ohio State is. Jeff Jackson, the coach for Notre Dame, said that Ohio State's the best team that they've played all season long. And I mean, everybody watched that game against Denver, and everybody was impressed by the way that Ohio State can play. And it's not just the fact that Ohio State can put up 5 goals on Denver, who has a really good defense. It's that Ohio State against other teams like Notre Dame can play that slower sort of game, take opportunities, make their own chances, and score when they absolutely have to, and they can defend when they absolutely have to. So a team like Denver, that's the defending national champions, to beat them 5-1 it's pretty crazy because they have a lot of talent, and obviously coming back, they have a lot of experience being the national champions last year. So for me, that was the best Ohio State has looked all season long.
Yeah, they're obviously getting really hot at the right time. I think they have a pretty big matchup coming up with Minnesota Duluth, and then we have the chance to look ahead, so it'd be pretty cool if we could have a Big Ten rematch. If Ohio State wins, it's a guaranteed Big Ten rematch. So how do you guys feel with this upcoming game against Minnesota Duluth?
Just looking at generally from the Ohio State point of view, I don't see how they're not just brimming with confidence. Like I said, it could not have gone any better for them in the first weekend. I mean, these are the ideal results, and it doesn't matter the sport. You're in a tournament, one-off, single elimination. It's all about who's hot and who's getting on a roll. I guess you have to maybe worry a little bit about, there's the week off between. Do you cool down a little bit? I highly doubt it. Rollick, Steve Miller, the coaching staff over there, they've been preaching the same thing from day one, so you wouldn't think that they're going to cool off, that you can take a week off and then pick right back up. And obviously, I think Denver's the game that we focus on because 5-1 against the defending champs. But going back to that Princeton game, Princeton was the hot team coming into the tournament. We talked about it last week that they had won 7 in a row. They have 2 of the top scorers in the country, 2 of the top 15 scorers in the country.
2 of the top 4 scorers.
2 of the top 4 scorers in the country. Okay. So to hold them to what you held them to, where it was, basically a shutout, 2 late garbage goals, I just don't see how Ohio State, one, isn't favored to beat Minnesota Duluth, which I don't follow bookies, but I'm sure they are, and 2, how they're not just absolutely overflowing with confidence and just ready to get back at it. I'm sure if you ask them, they would probably rather just play this weekend the way they're playing.
Well, Minnesota Duluth is the team you got to remember that Ohio State lost to last year in the NCAA tournament. It's a team that Ohio State's head coach, Steve Rollick, and the rest of his coaching staff knows well. Rollick was an assistant for 10 years at UMD. So they know how each other play. But UMD, they were one of the last teams in, if not the last team into the NCAA tournament. They were down coming into the NCAA tournament, but making it allowed them to realize that, this is like the time we got to get it going, and it's a final opportunity for us to win this season, and it gave them an appreciation for what the tournament means. So you can't, neglect that for UMD coming into the game. They're gonna have something to prove, and conversely, Ohio State's gonna have something to prove too, because they're bouncing back from that loss against UMD last season. So I think you can essentially throw everything out the door that we saw in round one. And these teams are really going to go after each other because they know each other well. And additionally, for UMD, they lost 7 seniors from their team a season ago that knocked off Ohio State. They're a young team. They're a team that had a ton of guys as members of the U.S. junior national team. So despite the fact that they lost all those guys, they really, really recruit well there, and they have a ton of young talent. So we'll see how that plays. It's kind of the factor where it's like such a big stage. The Frozen Four is, everything the Big Ten tournament was, everything the regional tournaments were, times 100. So you have a bunch of young guys in the face of all this pressure and all this press, and then you have Ohio State, who hasn't necessarily seen all the pressure of the Frozen Four before, but they've been to the tournament before. They're an older group of guys, so you kind of have the young guys on one side, the older guys on one side, but the big dogs who have been there before on the other side in UMD, and kind of the new elite team in college hockey in Ohio State. So I think it should be and could be a really good clash, but I think Ohio State should still be the favorite just based on the fact that they can play so many different versions of their own game and still be dominant at it.
I like the point you brought up about UMD being like the school that's used to being here. It's almost poetic in the way that, Ohio State, this is only the second time in program history to the Frozen Four, and who better for them to play than a team that's there, seemingly every year, one of those programs that's there all the time. So, birth by fire, you want to cement your place as a Frozen Four team and an elite team in hockey. You go out and you beat a school like Minnesota Duluth, and you say, we're here to stay, and we're going to be back here time and time again, which is obviously the goal of any program. But that being said, we all know, Rawlik and his message, they're not thinking about stuff like that. It's just going to be one game, focus on Minnesota Duluth, and, it should be a lot of fun.
I'm curious for both of you guys to ask a question. What do you think that if Ohio State advances to the championship, and if they were going to win a championship, what that means for Ohio State, and what do you think the student reaction will be to Ohio State hockey winning? Because it's like OSU hockey doesn't get a whole lot of recognition when it comes to, Ohio State, just because we have big football, and basketball had a great season this year. But, you see on Twitter, people are, after we win these games, Ohio State's a hockey school now. And the women's hockey team went to the Frozen Four too, and just as easily could have won that national championship on the women's side. So I'm just curious what you guys think, because you guys kind of have a feel through the lantern and everything of what do you think this will mean for the students?
Well, shameless plug, you said we are very involved here at the Lantern. There's a piece coming out, I think it's going to be in Thursday's paper, by Wyatt, who we had on last week. He's going to be right about why Ohio State should be a hockey school. So, yeah, I don't want to spoil anything I know that he's writing about, but I'm just going to say you should really check that piece out from the Lantern.
Certainly.
I think that it could have a big effect on Ohio State if they win it. What immediately came to my mind was Kyle Snyder, and obviously this team's going to have to do, even winning a national championship doesn't put you on Kyle Snyder level. But the analogy is that people at Ohio State really started to care about wrestling because Kyle Snyder made you care. And I think this is going to be corny. This is a school of champions. Like, Ohio State's used to winning championships.
I mean, it is. All you have to do is look at the winner schedule this season for Ohio State, and there's essentially every Ohio State team is in the top 10 or top 5.
I mean, we go down to fencing and synchronized swimming as dynasties at Ohio State. I mean, you win at Ohio State and you're going to be loved. I don't know how that translates into, let's say, attendance next year or, social media views or whatever, but I do know that if you win on this campus, people are going to take notice, and I think at least you're going to see a short burst of extra enthusiasm around the team because, you win at Ohio State, and arguably, to me, there's no better place to win in college.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say at first there's going to be a little bit of shock that people won't even realize that we were even in the Frozen Four or realize we got our hockey team that far because people just don't pay attention. But I think, like Zach said, to reiterate, when you win here, people take notice. And I think it's also not, I guess, too early to look ahead. And if Ohio State beats Minnesota Duluth, that puts 2 Big Ten teams in the championship no matter what. And I think pushing the conference as well, And Ohio State even just making that championship game, it puts them on the map already, and they're already on the map, but I think it'll put them on the map for the student body who just doesn't even know.
Yeah, and it's like the kids that are applying to Ohio State that love hockey, or it's like you come into Ohio State and you're like, do they even have a hockey team? It's like, okay, they have a hockey team. Well, are they good? And then you're like, oh, they won the national championship last year. Oh, they were in the Frozen Four last year. It's like, yeah, they're pretty good. So, I mean, being in the Frozen Four, I think, is already going to mean good things for OSU hockey next year, because at least more people are open to the idea and awake to the idea that we do have a hockey team and they are pretty damn good. And it's like you go to the games for free, you have a good time, and, you go out afterwards. So, I mean, I think it's so good for Ohio State in general as a school to now have hockey on a national championship caliber level. Obviously, don't want to jinx anything. They haven't won a national championship or even in the national championship game yet. But making it to the Frozen Four is something extremely special and something extremely difficult to do.
So I think from like a hockey matchup point, Ohio State Notre Dame's, the battles they've had this year, that's like the rematch, at least for me, I'd really like to see. But if you have Ohio State Michigan in the national championship game, everybody on campus is going to care. You could have Ohio State Michigan play for the national championship in rock, paper, scissors, and this campus would go nuts over the game. Like it does. If it's Ohio State Michigan, it doesn't matter what it is. People are going to care, and so that would be really cool if that was the national championship in hockey, because people are going to pay attention because we have a chance to win. But people are really going to pay attention if we have a chance to win and make Michigan sad in the same day.
Yeah, I think you're not going to get a different level of intensity for either game, because it's, of course, should Ohio State beat UMD, but we move on to the national championship game, and you don't want to think ahead too much, but it's like Notre Dame would probably be the hockey purists' idea, because these two teams are so similar and they've played so many good games, and the Big Ten championship was lost in overtime for Ohio State. But obviously you have the allure of the game on ice, the helmet matchup, the football helmets for Ohio State versus the Michigan football helmets, and they both, of course, wear them on the ice, and that's just another great thing. But, oh, man, that would be so sweet. And like you said, it would be so great for the campus, too, because people would really get engaged if it was Ohio State and Michigan. You don't want to root for Michigan, and I'm sure the Buckeyes on the ice aren't rooting for Michigan, but it's like, hey, if you have that opportunity, and the fact that OSU's been so dominant against them this season, and I mean, really going back to the past couple of seasons, that bodes well as well for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, so Dylan, you're kind of our insider college hockey guy. You know more about a lot of the other teams than I'd say Zach and I do.
Absolutely.
For someone listening that not really sure coming into this UMD game, what do you think Ohio State has to do to get to that next game and get this matchup we're all talking about?
I just think Ohio State needs to play their game. I mean, I just listened to each coach talk about their different teams, and the thing that stuck out that a lot of the coaches mentioned for Ohio State is that they can play different sorts of hockey. And I mean, once they get a feel, that's usually how their first periods work. They start to get a feel for the other team, they gather themselves, and then they react. So it's like once OSU gets a feel for Minnesota, they can turn it on offensively or they can turn it on defensively depending on what they need to do. But it seems like they always have so much composure, and poise. And that's another thing that these coaches stress. They were just so impressed by the poise and concentration that Ohio State had and the comfort they have with the puck, and even when they don't have the puck, playing defense. So, like I said, Ohio State just needs to play their game, and as long as they don't get lost in the moment, I think they'll be fine. That's going to be the key. And coming from a school like Ohio State, where so many eyes are on you all the time, where, like you said, a school of champions, in quotes, that helps out the Ohio State hockey team, I think, a lot.
Thanks for joining us this week, and be sure to check back next week on Over the Boards when we get our final episode before the Ohio State men's hockey team heads up to St. Paul, Minnesota for the Frozen Four. Go Bucks!